We're back with another episode of Prospects featuring multiple players. This time though, I've upped the ante. I've looked at multiple demos for each of these players so we can go more in depth on the breakdown to really understand each of these players' playstyles, skills, strengths, and potential weaknesses. Not all these players are particularly young either. I've made sure to include players who have been staples of the Tier 2 scene for a long time, guys who've been fragging out, farming, but never really got that chance to move up to Tier 1. With CS2 on the way, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how these players keep on grinding and developing. I think they could also play a key part in forming new rosters going into CS2, so I thought it'd be a great opportunity to talk about them in this video. Let's begin with someone who's actually mentioned in the comments of the last video. Now this guy is, well, he's exactly what I mean when I say a staple of Tier 2, farming for years and years. And a shout out to Henrique who actually mentioned him, but he probably was going to be a part of this video anyway. It's Matys of Sampi. This guy's a really exciting player. He's been one of the most impressive riflers in the Tier 2 scene, like just on a statistical basis for a long time now. So he's going to make a really interesting player to profile because we can really look into the nitty gritty and figure out how he gets these sorts of absurd numbers. To do this whilst being a primary rifler is something almost no one can achieve, even when playing against technically lesser competition. You just don't see people smurf like this. We begin with the mechanics, which is always imperative. Matys has an impressive headshot percentage, primarily thanks to his incredible mastery of the flicks. He's constantly snapping to heads, which makes him lethal in all aspects of the game. Honestly, over the course of all these demos, I couldn't really find anything to complain about in his game mechanically. His spray looked good, he knew when to burst, he knew when to tap, and he also looked so comfortable on every single weapon. He looked great on his second AWP when he picked that up, he made the Galil look viable, and then no matter the pistol, he was able to find some impact, dig some heads, and take down some kills. This all accumulates into a player who's a veritable mechanical monster, dangerous in every single round of play. While his mechanics do some of the explaining as to why he's so statistically notable, there's a little more to unravel. The other element we always observe, of course, in these videos is his playstyle. Let's find out how he goes about his business. Matys is a playmaker, allowed to go and make things happen independently to the rest of the team. This isn't exclusively his responsibility, but it is the majority of what he does. It's a huge factor on T size, where Matys will go find openers with minimal support, just a lot of space to work with. There are times where I think he does try to do too much, but these are thankfully rare. It's also a skill that a lot of players have trouble balancing. Knowing when to take a step back rather than a step forward is something that comes with a little more maturity. I think we got to see this really develop in players like Nico over the years, who were more prone to taking that extra risk when they didn't really need to as younger players. The fact that he's taking these fights makes it abundantly clear that self-confidence is running through his veins, and nowhere was this more clear than Inferno. In so many rounds, he was the difference between a man down and two men up. When he isn't alone, Matys is often the spearhead of many set plays that the team runs. In these scenarios, he's either being trusted to find the kill, or he's playing the sacrificial lamb. Whatever the case may be, he is typically excellent in the execution of these duties. There's a certain duality of play that will be key for Matys in terms of his development at the higher level, and that's his ability to play both away from and in the pack. Now, we've got some good examples of both, though he really does seem to be more of an extremity guy who needs to be given his space and maybe, set up a little bit to find the big impact. One thing that does tend to, I think, jar players when they take that step up is after years of being the man, if they have to be the second or third rifler on a team who doesn't get that many opportunities, they can maybe struggle to find the right headspace to really fit in with the team and optimize themselves. And that's why you'll see often players who make that tier 2, tier 1 jump either burst onto the scene and shock everyone, or take a step back down, because it just doesn't work out. Finally, just to touch on some of his CT play, because everything we've talked about really has been focused on the T side. Let's just talk about a bit of his anchoring, actually. It was superb on overpass especially, and he had a spatial awareness that was, well, evident to anyone to see. Matys dodged death daringly at Dildo on several occasions. He was able to balance hiding, peeking, and flash timings to perfection. One factor in these scenarios is likely the amount of time he spent on this roster. Getting reps in with a specific group will allow him to understand the positions everyone plays more naturally, as well as the way they call their flashes, the timings, all these little things that make you such a great Counter-Strike player. Overall, I was quite satisfied with what I found in these demos. I went in looking for an explanation for his HLTV rating, his frags per round, and I found one. There's plenty of evidence in these demos that this is a rifler who shouldn't be playing CCT events for much longer. Grading, A+. The Yens Academy side has actually been coming into their own since the absence of We Play Academy has been really affecting their schedule. Their results have been getting better, and their individuals have been getting stronger. A great example of that growth has been Podi. When they first started out as a team, when they were playing in We Play and some of the online cups surrounding it, he really struggled. Now, the entire team, aside from Miltsy, it seemed really did struggle, but the evolution from what was a timid, kind of weak AWPer, all the way to the man we see today, has been amazing. So let's get into the demos and take a look at how he's playing now, because Ents Academy have been on a tear online relative to what we expect from them, and Podi especially has been putting up great numbers, so it'd be great to figure out exactly how he's been getting that done. It becomes immediately apparent that Podi has progressed greatly in terms of his comfort on the server. He looks far sharper than he ever did in those early WePlay days. All of the experience competing has allowed him to really settle in, and it shows in his mechanics. His demos are littered with highlight moments, mostly thanks to his AWP flicks. There are some great rounds with pistols and rifles, but these are not the focus. Podi generally does not look at ease using the weapons that aren't his big green. In fact, there's a great deal of variability in his fights. He seems as likely to have an embarrassing miss as a multi-kill. Thankfully, he does make up for his shortcomings with mostly solid fight choices. He plays really well in the clutch and the late round, and knows when and where to take his chances in the flow of the game. Focusing more on the AWP, Podi is quite consistent with the easy shots. If anything, he's far less flashy than many of his peers, and at times misses the type of flicks young stars live and die on. I think this is a good problem to have, as it does bring some consistency to his AWP play. In Podi's playstyle is where I spy the most room for growth. Something I always harp on about is opening fights for AWPers, as those who only snipe in the late round are always limited by their team's success. The typical round Ents Academy get from Podi on the T side closely resembles Matys during his Movistar Riders tenure. There's some basic angle holding, a slow progression forward, then a util dump onto the execute. All of this is useful for the team, and it isn't a problem at all when he doesn't have the AWP, but with the AWP I feel like we're missing a whole facet of Podi's potential play. If we go back to that Matys example, he really came into his own when he moved on to Ents and got to be more explosive, more aggressive. Even during the times on Movistar where he looked like a superstar, he did more than just throw that util. I think this is something that Podi will really have to work on. It might be a confidence thing, it may be a system limitation, but I think he needs to put his foot down, maybe step up in a meeting or two and say, hey, I can take these fights, I can take these duels. Why not let the AWP do what one of these riflers is doing? Got a far better hit rate than them anyway. But we'll see. As for a grade, I'm going to give him, well, it's a strong B+. I feel like we're bordering on an A- here. There are many things he does really well, but we're not quite pushing that level of transcendent that we'd want to see from a super young AWPer. He'll definitely be good at the next level, but it'll take a little time for him to get there. When Neofrag got taken from Sinners, Dytor was my pick of the players to take his spot. He has a similar style in the loosest possible sense, though Vertigo is probably the ones where they're closest in terms of at least their roles. We begin on the CT side, where Dytor is tasked with handling ramp, and he does so at a very high level. He has a few opening ideas for finding advantages and openings, but importantly also understands the counters that could be coming. You see him anticipate and react quickly to smoke walls and one-ways, knowing where to look at all times. Now, one of the most underrated parts of being a CS player, but a ramp player on Vertigo especially, is utility usage. But here Dytor looked quite solid. Something a lot of players I've watched at this level really can't say. His util sets clearly facilitate the early brawls and skirmishes out the ramp, creating little advantages for him to exploit. In the mid-round, he always has a flash or a smoke in reserve to set up himself or a teammate to keep control of the ramp. Now, the numbers don't really paint Dytor as a man who throws a great flash, but what I saw in the demo was clearly evidence of the contrary. He can do it, it's just not primarily his duty. And of course, with that being said, there's more to util usage than a simple flashbang. Smokes don't really appear in this list, and even molly and nade damage isn't really recorded in the same correct way it should be, so there's a lot more to say about the eye test than the numbers here. Now back to his actual playstyle. Any mistake the T's made was really pounced on and converted using, well, Dytor's mechanical brilliance. This guy is a solid aimer. He showcased quite a few good flicks and tracking shots in these demos, but more importantly, he is a great sprayer. With both the M4 and the AK, it's rare for him to put a bullet wrong in an extended engagement. Now let's switch over to the T side. A consistent factor across many maps is Dytor's fantastic Glock play. Here he can show off that magnificent aim in full detail, whilst also previewing one of his primary T-side roles. Fundamentals are all well and good, but this kind of shooting is game-breaking. Now, Dytor plays in the pack the entire T-side, acting as the hard entry in many scenarios. Whilst this is primarily a supportive role, a player with this kind of skill can often make the most of it. Even when he's not getting the big entries, he's creating space and taking aggro, which serves his team well. He can get traded out, which still looks good on the stat sheet, even if it isn't the most significant stat. The other side of his pack play is when he's unleashed as a trader. Here, Dytor quite often converts opportunities into multi-kills, making watchers wonder why he's ever in any other position. Now obviously, what I said about the T side applies to all maps, but that's actually also true of his CT side play. I used Vertigo as my primary example to keep that Neofrag comparison alive and well, but really he does have good opening ideas. He doesn't mind being challenged, he's always creative with his counters and solutions to the things that are thrown at him, and obviously he's always got a trick up his sleeve with that util in the mid to late round to retake space and gather info, so all in all, a very solid CT player. All in all, I'll give him an A, as Dytor can perform well in a multitude of different ways. What makes him such a fascinating player is that he's a great cog in the machine, able to keep turning and aiding others no matter the pressure or the environment. He may be a little limited compared to some of the other star players we've even seen in this video. I mean, Matys is a great example as a rifler who can shine brighter singularly, but Dytor, I think, is just a better team player. As I write the script, Neofrag has actually been brought in to replace Dytor on Eklot. I'm a little annoyed, although some of the things I mentioned could be an explanation. You know, he doesn't burn that bright, but he just makes sense on a team and makes so many of the right fundamental moves that I would have really liked to see them both on the same side, to be honest. I think Neofrag, yes, does need a little more setting up. He does far less of the grunt work than Dytor does. But I think there's a scenario where they can switch out some of the CT roles and make it work, especially on T side. I don't think there would be too much clash from what I've actually noticed, but I'm not the GM. So hopefully Dytor can bounce back, find another team, because he definitely can play on a good side. Now, on to our final player. The Asian scene has been one of the most fascinating things to follow in CS for the last year or so. Of course, they haven't been able to produce an actual competitor yet, but they have a lot of dangerous teams on the rise. Forming the ranks of these rosters is a litany of young fraggers. One such fragger is the Mongolian youngster yAmi. He featured on the D13 roster that made waves in the EU back in 2022, alongside names like Score and Annihilation. Now playing on rosters that feature far less star power, yAmi has come to the fore. I decided to take a look at yAmi over some of the other young Asian fraggers just because of his unique statistical profile. I'm always fascinated by riflers who are able to maintain a high headshot percentage and a high kill rate, as the two things usually aren't too easy to keep entwined. For his career, he's headshotting at a 60% rate whilst grabbing over 0.7 kills per round. That's pretty ridiculous. Let's dive into how. The first demo I loaded up was a 30 bomb demolition, so it was pretty clear what this guy does well mechanically. yAmi's belief in his pre-aims is zealot-like. This isn't a one-off either. Even in the matches where things don't quite go his way and he's not absolutely farming, he's playing like this. Every peek is made with intent, and every clear is pre-planned. This, of course, primarily applies to the T side, but yAmi's speed of adjustment and the crispness of his flicks are universal. Something I wasn't expecting to see is yAmi picking up the AWP, but it was clearly something he felt comfortable doing on the CT side. His flicks were crazy, and he was really able to show off his versatility in these rounds. Now, there isn't really too much to say about his spraying, because he's really a short burst type of player. If he doesn't kill you in 4 bullets, he's more like to reset and try again than he is to actually just keep on spraying. In terms of his style of play, the more interesting side to talk about is again the offensive. It's not that he had noticeably more impact there, it's just fascinating how he approaches rounds. yAmi plays like his attention span is less than a fraction of a second. As a player often left alone on the extremities, he has a lot of angles to clear, and boy does he clear them quickly. Not only this, but he'll find different things to look at, double check, spam, fiddle with. He'll do anything but sit still and hold an angle when he's clearing out space or taking up residence in an area. He's always got to be doing something. He's so fidgety, it's annoying. Kind of fun, but very annoying. This manic style has its payoffs, though yAmi can often be accused of moving on before having truly checked something. When he's done clearing, he's using his aim to bash in bomb sites. This can be as the point man taking focus or trading over the shoulder of his team. Once into these sites, he's quite often pushing deep and making plays, with the occasional overextension. Come on, he's 18. What were you expecting? Discipline? On the defensive side, yAmi does a bit of floating, primarily being asked to make big plays. This can come in the form of set plays early, or rotating into an area to help lock it down, and even, retakes. It's Counter-Strike, these are the 3 things people do. Add on to this the fact that he loves to make that AWP sing, and you've got quite the defensive dynamo on your hands. As the second AWPer, he actually likes to be the one taking more risks. This injects an element of flair and aggression to his team's defenses, keeping the T-sides on their toes. All in all, I have to admit, I did really enjoy watching yAmi play, and I kinda knew I would. Yes, he's rough around the edges with quite a lot to learn, but I just love watching a kid with this much belief in his mechanics and this much actual skill to back it up. It's tough to know exactly what team would be the best for him to develop in, and with CS2 coming around, there's a lot to be determined for this young lad. As a grade, I kinda have to give him a B+. The potential is clear as day, but there's still a lot of work to be done. He needs to be reined in, maybe given a few preset opening ideas he can actually work through that aren't his own improvisation, and all in all, play a little more off teammates. I didn't see a lot of him setting people up, him being sacrificial. It's more that he is such an amazing individual, he can just be let loose and allowed to figure things out. Alright, if you enjoyed, leave a like and sub. There will be another one of these during CSGO, I guess, technically. We're already moving on to CS2 events in terms of professional play, but I still have about 5 or 6 different players' demos to do exactly this kind of video again. So there'll be another one of those. So yeah, sub if you want to see more of that. Of course, leave a comment telling me your thoughts on any of these players. I'm open to hear them. And of course, leave suggestions if you have other players you think should be on the rise that I should keep an eye out on. I always do read these, and I actually always do go check up on them. So leave a comment. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.